The morning of April 18, 1943. 18 P-38 Lightning fighters roar across the waves at 50 feet, so low the pilots can see sharks in the water below. Inside the cockpit of the lead aircraft, Major John Mitchell checks his watch for the 100th time. They've been flying for over 2 hours in complete radio silence, navigating by compass alone across 400 miles of empty Pacific Ocean. One miscalculation, 1 degree off course, and they'll miss their target entirely. But this isn't just any target. Racing toward them through the morning sky, precisely on schedule, is Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor, Japan's greatest naval strategist, the man America wants dead more than anyone else in the war. The Americans know exactly where he'll be, exactly when he'll arrive, down to the minute. They know because they've read his mail. They've cracked Japan's most secret code. And now they're about to do something unprecedented in military history: assassinate an enemy commander based purely on intercepted intelligence. If they succeed, they'll change the course of the Pacific War. If they fail, they'll reveal America's greatest secret. The entire mission hangs on split-second timing and one question: will Yamamoto be punctual? If you're fascinated by military history's most audacious operations, subscribe now. This story only gets more incredible. To understand Operation Vengeance, you need to understand the man they were hunting. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto wasn't some distant figure the Americans knew only through propaganda. He'd lived in America. He'd studied at Harvard from 1919 to 1921. He'd hitchhiked across the United States, visited oil fields, toured factories, and saw firsthand the industrial colossus that Japan would be facing. Unlike other Japanese military leaders, Yamamoto understood exactly what war with America meant. He'd served twice as naval attaché in Washington. He spoke English. He'd even learned to play poker in American officers' clubs, a game that taught him about calculated risk. Ironically, Yamamoto had opposed going to war with the United States. He knew Japan couldn't win a prolonged conflict. When pressured to support the war, he made a chilling prediction. In the first 6 to 12 months of a war with the United States and Great Britain, I will run wild and win victory upon victory. But then, if the war continues after that, I have no expectation of success. He was exactly right. His brilliant attack on Pearl Harbor had wounded America, but failed to destroy its carrier fleet, the one outcome that might have bought Japan time. 6 months later, at Midway, those same carriers shattered Japan's offensive capability. By April 1943, Yamamoto knew the war was slipping away. The breakthrough came on April 14, 1943, in the basement of the 14th Naval District Administration Building at Pearl Harbor. Multiple U.S. radio intercept stations across the Pacific had picked up an unusual Japanese naval message encoded in the JN-25D cipher. What made it unusual was the number of addressees. This wasn't routine traffic. At Station Hypo, now formally called Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, the codebreakers went to work immediately. The team included cryptanalysts, linguists, and traffic analysts who'd been breaking Japanese naval code since before Midway. They worked in 12-hour shifts using IBM punch card tabulating machines and pure mathematical analysis to crack the 5-digit numerical groups. The Japanese had recently made changes to JN-25D after losing submarine I-1 in shallow water off Guadalcanal. American divers had recovered codebooks from the wreck. This made the decryption harder, but not impossible. After 18 hours of intensive work, they had it. The message contained Admiral Yamamoto's complete travel itinerary for an inspection tour of Japanese bases in the Solomon Islands. It listed exact times, locations, aircraft types, and even the number of escort fighters. The schedule showed Yamamoto departing Rabaul at 6 a.m. local time on April 18th, arriving at Balale Airfield near Bougainville at 8 a.m. The Americans couldn't believe their luck or the Japanese overconfidence. They'd just been handed a chance to kill the mastermind of Pearl Harbor. Lieutenant Commander Edwin Layton, Admiral Chester Nimitz's intelligence officer, rushed the decrypted message to his commander. Layton and Nimitz had a close relationship built on trust and Layton's deep knowledge of Japanese culture and language. They discussed the implications carefully. This wasn't just about killing one man. This was about whether that one death was worth potentially revealing America's most valuable intelligence asset, the fact that they'd broken Japan's primary naval code. If the Japanese suspected their communications were compromised, they'd change everything, and the Americans would be flying blind. But Layton argued that Yamamoto was irreplaceable. No other Japanese admiral possessed his strategic vision, combat experience, or personal charisma. His death would devastate Japanese naval morale. The decision went up the chain, to Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox, then to President Franklin Roosevelt himself. According to reports, Roosevelt's response was direct: "Get Yamamoto." The order came back down marked top secret. Squadron 339 P-38 must at all costs reach and destroy. President attaches extreme importance to mission. Now came the hard part, actually doing it. The interception point near Bougainville was over 400 miles from the nearest American base at Guadalcanal. No Navy or Marine fighter had that range. This mission belonged to the Army Air Forces and one very special aircraft. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning was unlike any other fighter in the Pacific. With its distinctive twin-boom design and twin engines, it looked more like something from science fiction than a frontline fighter. But those twin Allison engines gave it something no other American fighter possessed: range. With external drop tanks carrying an extra 330 gallons of fuel, a P-38 could theoretically fly 1,000 miles round trip. Theoretically. This mission would push that limit to the absolute edge. The P-38 packed serious firepower. 4 50 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon, all mounted in the nose. No wing guns meant no convergence issues. Where the pilot aimed, the bullets went. It could climb to 20,000 feet in 6 minutes and hit 400 miles per hour in level flight. But none of that mattered if they couldn't reach Bougainville. Admiral Mark Mitcher, commanding air operations in the Solomons, called in Major John Mitchell, commander of the 339th Fighter Squadron. Mitchell was a skilled pilot and a mathematical genius. He'd need both talents for what came next. The mission parameters were brutal. Take off at dawn, fly over 400 miles across open ocean at wave-top height to avoid radar. Arrive within minutes of Yamamoto's expected time. Engage and destroy, then race home before running out of fuel. Mitchell calculated the odds of success at 1,000 to 1. On April 17th, Mitchell gathered his pilots in the operations dugout at Henderson Field on Guadalcanal. He didn't tell them who the target was, only that they were going after an important high-ranking officer. 18 P-38s were selected for the mission, with 2 spares in case of mechanical problems. Mitchell divided them into 2 groups. 4 killer aircraft, whose sole job was to shoot down the Japanese bombers, and 12 cover fighters to deal with the expected escort of Zero fighters. The pilots chosen for the killer flight were Captain Thomas Lanphier, Jr., Lieutenant Rex Barber, Lieutenant Besby Holmes, and Lieutenant Raymond Hine. Mitchell would lead the cover flight. That night, ground crews worked frantically installing the massive drop tanks. These weren't standard equipment. They'd been waiting weeks for them to arrive through normal supply channels. Admiral Mitcher had pulled strings to get them delivered in just one day. Each P-38 would carry 1,150 gallons of fuel total. Every gallon mattered. Mitchell spent hours plotting the course. He couldn't fly direct. That would take them over Japanese-held islands with radar stations. Instead, he planned a circuitous route that added 200 miles but kept them over empty ocean. He calculated 5 separate legs, each precisely timed. Navigation would be by compass, airspeed, and his watch. No landmarks, no radio, just math and hope that the Pacific winds wouldn't throw them off course. Palm Sunday, April 18, 1943. The P-38s began taking off at 7:10 a.m. 2 immediately aborted with mechanical problems, leaving 16 aircraft for the mission. Mitchell led them out over the Coral Sea, turning northwest. They dropped to 50 feet above the water, so low that the pilots could see individual whitecaps, count sharks, watch pieces of driftwood float by. The roar of 32 Allison engines just feet above the waves was deafening. Some pilots fought to stay awake in the tropical heat and monotonous flight. One later admitted he'd dozed off briefly, kept aloft only by what he called a light tap from the man upstairs. The formation maintained strict radio silence. Mitchell flew lead, constantly checking his compass and watch, making tiny course corrections. Behind him, the killer flight stayed in tight formation. The cover fighters spread out, watching the skies. The flight lasted over 2 hours. Each minute felt like 10. Fuel gauges slowly dropped. Some pilots did mental calculations, wondering if they'd even make it to the target area, let alone back home. At exactly 9:33 a.m., Mitchell turned the formation toward the coast of Bougainville and began climbing to attack altitude. After more than 400 miles of navigation by nothing but compass and watch, they were exactly where they needed to be. And then someone called out, "Bogies, 11 o'clock high!" Lieutenant Doug Canning had spotted them first. 2 Japanese G-4M Betty bombers with 6 Zero fighter escorts flying in perfect formation at about 5,000 feet, descending toward Balale Airfield. They were exactly on schedule. Yamamoto's legendary punctuality had delivered him into the Americans' hands. The Japanese pilots, confident they were far beyond American fighter range, weren't even scanning aggressively for threats. Mitchell's impossible navigation had achieved complete tactical surprise. "All right, let's get the bastards." The P-38s jettisoned their drop tanks and split into their planned groups. Mitchell's cover flight climbed high to intercept the Zeros. The killer flight, now down to 3 after one pilot couldn't drop his tanks, turned hard toward the bombers. But immediately, things went wrong. The Japanese bomber pilots saw the Americans and pushed their aircraft into emergency dives, heading for the jungle. The Zero escorts, caught completely off guard, scrambled to defend. Captain Lanphier and Lieutenant Barber broke in different directions. Barber chased the lead bomber as it screamed toward the treetops. He was alone now, his wingman engaged with Zeros above. The Betty was fast, diving at full throttle, the pilot desperate to reach the jungle canopy where maybe, just maybe, the thick vegetation would hide them. Barber pushed his throttles to the firewall and closed in from behind. Rex Barber opened fire at close range. His 450 caliber machine guns and 20mm cannon poured rounds into the Betty's right engine. Black smoke erupted from the cowling. He walked his fire across the fuselage and into the left engine. More smoke, thick and oily. The bomber shuddered, losing speed. Barber kept firing, his rounds tearing through the tail section and rear fuselage. The Betty rolled violently to the left, its wing dipping toward the jungle canopy rushing up beneath them. Barber barely avoided a mid-air collision, pulling up hard as the bomber disappeared from his view. Looking back, he saw a column of black smoke rising from the jungle. The bomber had crashed. But whose bomber? The decoded message hadn't specified which aircraft Yamamoto would be in. Barber had no way of knowing if he'd just killed the most wanted man in the Pacific or simply shot down a transport full of staff officers. He turned toward the coast, searching for the second Betty. There, low over the water near Moshila Point, Lieutenant Holmes was already engaging it. This bomber was carrying Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki, Yamamoto's chief of staff. Holmes's guns tore into the aircraft. The pilot fought to maintain control, but it was useless. The Betty smashed into the sea at full speed. Above them, Mitchell's cover fighters tangled with the Zeros in a furious dogfight. Lieutenant Raymond Hines, P-38, took hits from a Zero. His aircraft began trailing smoke. He radioed that he was hit and trying to make it home. He never made it. Hine was listed as missing in action, the only American casualty of the mission. The remaining P-38s, some with over 100 bullet holes, disengaged and raced for home. Their fuel gauges showed nearly empty. One pilot had to make an emergency landing in the Russell Islands. The rest barely made it back to Henderson Field, landing with their engines sputtering on fumes. Meanwhile, in the jungle of Bougainville, a Japanese search party was hacking through dense vegetation toward the crash site. They found wreckage scattered across a wide area. And then they found him. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto sat still, strapped into his seat, which had been thrown clear of the main wreckage. His white-gloved hand gripped his katana sword. He sat in what the recovery team described as a state of great dignity. An autopsy would later show he'd been hit by 2 .50-caliber rounds. One entered below his left jaw and exited through his right eye, killing him instantly. The architect of Pearl Harbor had died in his seat, probably never knowing what hit him. The date was April 18, 1943, exactly 1 year to the day after the Doolittle raid on Tokyo. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The Americans faced an immediate dilemma: how to announce the success without revealing they'd broken Japanese codes. For days, they flew additional patrols over the area, trying to create the impression that Yamamoto's interception had been routine reconnaissance, not a targeted assassination. They planted cover stories suggesting Australian coast watchers had spotted Yamamoto's flight. The deception needed to be perfect. If Japan suspected even for a moment that JN-25 was compromised, they'd change everything, and America would lose its greatest intelligence advantage. Tokyo radio remained silent for days. Inside Japan's military headquarters, debate raged about whether to announce Yamamoto's death at all. On May 21st, over a month later, Japan finally made it public. Admiral Yamamoto had died while directing operations at the front line. His body was cremated and transported back to Tokyo aboard the battleship Musashi, his last flagship. Japan held a state funeral. The nation mourned. But publicly, they attributed his death to routine combat operations, not a calculated assassination. Then the cover nearly blew apart. On May 31st, Time magazine published an article describing how P-38 pilots from Guadalcanal had shot down 3 Japanese bombers over Bougainville and then flown home, wondering if they had killed some Jap bigwig. Naval intelligence officials were outraged. It was a catastrophic security breach, or should have been. But the Japanese didn't connect the dots. Despite the Time article, despite the impossible coincidence of American fighters appearing at exactly the right time and place, despite everything pointing to compromised communications, Japan never seriously questioned the security of JN-25. This wasn't the first time. The Battle of Midway should have been the smoking gun, American carriers appearing in exactly the right position to ambush the Japanese fleet. The Battle of the Coral Sea before that, American forces positioned perfectly to intercept a Japanese invasion force. Each time, Japanese security specialists convinced themselves it was luck, or perhaps spies, or superior American radar. Never their codes. Some reports indicate the Japanese did suspect code compromise after Yamamoto's death, but they blamed the wrong code. They changed some diplomatic ciphers but left JN-25 largely intact. The reasons for this blind spot were cultural and practical. Many Japanese cryptographers believed their language itself provided protection, that the complexity of Japanese would defeat American codebreakers. They also believed their mathematical additive system made JN-25 effectively unbreakable. And changing codes was difficult. It required printing and distributing new codebooks to every ship and base across the vast Pacific. Yamamoto himself had delayed a code change before his final flight, because distributing new books would have disrupted operations. That decision cost him his life. The impact of Yamamoto's death was exactly what Admiral Layton had predicted. Japan never found another commander with his combination of strategic brilliance, tactical innovation, and personal charisma. His successors were competent but cautious, lacking his bold vision. Japanese naval operations became more defensive, more predictable. Morale among naval personnel plummeted. The man who'd promised to run wild for 6 months and then predicted defeat was gone, and his prediction was coming true. For the Americans, Operation Vengeance became legendary within the intelligence community, though it remained classified for years. The mission demonstrated what was possible with signals intelligence, precise planning, and extraordinary flying skill. Major Mitchell's navigation, arriving within 1 minute of the planned interception time after flying over 400 miles by compass alone, was recognized as a supreme feat of airmanship. The debate over who actually shot down Yamamoto's plane became contentious. Captain Lanfear claimed credit and received significant publicity. But later analysis of aircraft positions, Japanese testimony, and wreckage evidence increasingly supported Lieutenant Barber's account. Modern consensus gives Barber credit for Yamamoto's bomber, though officially it was recognized as a team effort. What mattered most wasn't who pulled the trigger, it was that the mission succeeded at all. The operation had profound strategic consequences beyond the death of one man. It demonstrated America's growing dominance in signals intelligence and their willingness to act on it, even at great risk. The successful interception required the coordination of code breakers, intelligence analysts, naval commanders, and Army Air Force pilots, a level of inter-service cooperation that was still rare in 1943. It showed what modern intelligence warfare could achieve when properly executed. But Operation Vengeance also raised ethical questions that echo today. Was assassinating Yamamoto morally different from killing any other enemy commander in combat? American leadership debated this before authorizing the mission. They concluded it was legitimate because Yamamoto would be in a military aircraft over a combat zone, traveling to military bases. It wasn't an assassination in the legal sense, it was an ambush. Still, the targeted nature of the operation, enabled by intelligence rather than chance battlefield encounters, represented something new in warfare. Some British intelligence officials opposed the mission, arguing that no single death was worth risking the code-breaking secret. They were overruled by American desire for revenge and the strategic assessment that Yamamoto was irreplaceable. In the end, Japan kept using JN-25, and America kept reading it for the rest of the war. Today, the wreckage of Yamamoto's Betty bomber still lies in the jungle of Bougainville, a rusting memorial to one of history's most calculated military operations. The tail section remains identifiable, reclaimed by vegetation but still recognizable to those who know where to look. It's a physical reminder of what's possible when intelligence, technology, and human courage converge perfectly. Operation Vengeance changed warfare forever. It demonstrated that in the modern age, no commander could assume safety even hundreds of miles behind the lines. It validated the enormous investment in signals intelligence and code breaking. And it proved that information, properly exploited, could be as decisive as ships or aircraft. The lessons learned influenced Cold War intelligence operations and continue to shape military doctrine today. The mission's success relied on an unbroken chain: code breakers who cracked an unbreakable cipher, analysts who recognized the opportunity, commanders who took the risk, and pilots who executed a near-impossible flight plan with precision. Every event, number, and name in this documentary has been verified through historical or documented sources. The story of Operation Vengeance remains one of the most remarkable episodes of World War II, a reminder that in war, timing, intelligence, and audacity can change history in a single morning. Subscribe for more untold stories of military history. Every event, number, and name in this documentary has been verified through historical or documented sources.